Now, talking devices are really big among the visually impaired. How about reading? We talked about writing just now. Well, maybe you've heard of the talking book program. I believe it was started in the 1930s. The idea was to loan visually impaired people phonographs and records that had spoken words on them, that had books that were narrated. This was long before the books on tape and the books on CD that you hear about now. And it's free. If you are visually impaired, or if you have a legitimate print disability, let's say dyslexia, for example, you can often qualify for the talking book program. They used to need a letter for a doctor. I think there's instructions on how to do that in the catalogs and the online website, which, by the way, you will get the address for a little later on in here in a handout I'm going to show you. So they have these catalogs of the many, many, many thousands of recorded books that they produce. This is a 2-month installment of the catalog. This, I believe, is the yearly edition of a similar catalog. And they have catalogs for children's reading and catalogs for books for adults and things like that. This is wonderful. When I started, they were giving us 33 1/3 RPM records. They loaned the records to us. They arrived in these big black containers with these retaining straps. When we were done listening to the records, listening to the books, we simply bound them up again and sent them back to the cooperating library. We didn't even have to pay postage. So in the comfort of our own home, we could order the books, get the player for free, the phonograph, get the records, send them back and forth for free, no cost whatsoever to us. How often do you hear that about something from the U.S. government? Not too often, right? It was wonderful for me. Because I have to read so close, I read very slowly. It would be very difficult for me to get through a normal novel with my eyesight reading visually, although I could do it. It is much better for me to read audibly, at least me. My wife likes to read Braille a lot, I think more than listening, but I like to listen more than read Braille. My Braille's a little rusty. So what happened as technology marched on is the records were produced at slower and slower speeds so they could put more recording time on each disc, which means you can get more pages on every phonograph record. And a little later on, after that, they started distributing the records in flexible disc format. These are a throwaway item. They often distributed magazines like this. Your mom and dad might remember getting some of these in the mail as an advertisement promotion, not as talking books. But that's one of the ways in which they kind of help to prolong the life of the phonograph record. And then, of course, a little later on, people stopped listening to records and they started getting their books on cassette. Now, frankly, I like the discs better because I hate it when tapes get tangled or break. It's almost impossible for me to get them untangled. Well, nowadays, of course, everything is going digital. So what we need to do is get a different kind of player, a player that played the talking books in digital form. And if I can find the book here, I will show you. I can at least show you the player. I thought I had the... No, that's a Kindle. That's a Kindle. Well, I can at least show you the player. Hold on here, guys. There it is. Oh, and here's the one of the talking books. Nowadays, we don't use cassettes anymore. We get our books in the form of a little cartridge. Well, my wife and I have so many things in our house that talk. when strangers come to visit and don't know what we have, it really freaks them out. Now, Tina, this is probably what you would get if you became involved in the Talking Book program. One of these wonderful free players. Essentially what this is, this little cartridge, is a flash drive, a USB flash drive in a very accessible package. So somebody who's not very dexterous, maybe they have a neurological problem or have trouble handling things, well, it's easy because it has a hole in it and they're very easy to manipulate. You put the cartridge in the player. See if I can do this here. My wife is much better at this than I am. There we go. And you turn the bad boy on.
We're not plugged in.
No, it doesn't have to be.
Player on.
Frontier medicine, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, 1492 to 1941.
Current position.
Library of Congress sanitation. The formation of the American Medical Association. The
Well,
first
yeah.
black doctors. The first women doctors. And finally, the early 20th century shift to a formal scientific approach to medicine. That, by the post-war period, had, for the most part, eliminated the trial and error of practical methods that were at the center of
So you can alter the pitch, and you can alter the speed, and you can move back and forth through the book. These are absolutely wonderful. Doesn't that sound nice? It's a real pleasure to read these. But you know, that isn't the end of it. You know, you don't have to get these little cartridges in the mail. You can actually go to the Talking Book website and download the books
Frontier medicine,
right off the
from
internet.
Atlantic to the Pacific, 1492 to 1941.
So, I mean, talk about instant gratification.
To increase the volume by 1 step,
Quiet.
press the volume up button. There are 15 power battery charge remaining, greater than 29 hours. Battery
Quiet.
player off.
Yes, good. Well, that's wonderful. Now, essentially, we have the same regulations. You have to be visually impaired or have a print disability. But again, the books are free and the players are free. But of course, you must make sure that you don't share the books with other people because they're only for the visually impaired. This is one of the wonderful things about the book publishers. They are just fantastic about being generous to allow their books, their products, which sighted people have to pay for, to be put in the talking book format so they can be shared with visually impaired people. What about books, though, that are too old or obscure? Maybe they're not on the talking books. Well, there's a volunteer organization. In fact, there are many. There's one called bookshare.org. That's a community of volunteers that legally scan in printed books and convert them into regular computerized text that can be then sent over the internet to other visually impaired people. Now, there are provisions in copyright law to allow us to do this. You pay $50 a year, and you are entitled to download a maximum of 100 books a month. So yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good deal. And my wife now, who's blind, she is a Bookshare volunteer. She scans the printed books in, or proofreads books that other people have scanned, and then the collection grows and grows and grows. So this is for the books that are a little maybe less popular or older that aren't on talking books. They have communities of volunteers like that who are nice enough to put this in text format, the same kind of text that you could read in your word processor. Because once you get it in regular text format, you can do anything with it. You can have your computer speak it to you using a speech synthesizer. You can have your computer braille it out. You can magnify the screen if you do like to read visually but need larger letters. Now, that's good for you future teachers. Because if you have a visually impaired student in your classroom, you don't have to worry about usually printing stuff out for them. Just give them the original word processor files. And then they can take those, use them on their computer, and access the material in whatever way is most comfortable for them. You don't have to print it out, because then that's the process of printing it out. Then they have to take the printed material and scan it in and convert it to text. Why not just give them the original file? In fact, that's one thing you can really do to help make the lives of your students easier. If somebody comes to you in the semester before your course begins, they usually do that to find out what readings you're going to ask the students to access, what books, what articles, things like that. Please have your reading lists for the next semester ready, so that if you are approached by a parent or a student or maybe a teacher, maybe the special ed teacher, you will have that material ready. Then they have the opportunity to get the books put in Braille or recorded audibly or whatever, so that when your class does start, the students will be ready. My wife, for example, back in the 70s, when she came to a local high school here, she had to go without her Braille books for about 3 or 4 weeks. And that put her at a significant disadvantage, because the rest of the students could read the text. She couldn't, because they didn't have the book she needed yet. Nowadays, though, it's much better because of the digital technology. The teacher could have given her the text file, or maybe she could have gotten it from Bookshare or Talking Books or whatever. So there's a much more rapid turnaround time. When I was going to high school and college, I had a lot of books I had to read, and there was a wonderful organization, Educational Tape Recording for the Blind. But back then, they had people read the books on reel-to-reel tape. That shows you how long ago it's been in college. And they were fantastic readers, wonderful people. But it took them a couple of weeks to get you the beginning chapters of the book. If we could have got that information earlier, that would have really helped. So that's one thing you can do to make the lives of your students much easier.